Imagine walking into a room full of successful people. Everyone is talking. Ideas are flying across the room. Some are trying to impress everyone with what they know. Others interrupt before anyone else can finish a sentence. It's loud, competitive, almost chaotic. But then, you notice one person. They aren't trying to dominate the conversation. They aren't speaking the most. In fact, they've barely said anything at all. Yet every few minutes, someone looks at them, waiting, almost expecting them to speak. And when they finally do, the room becomes quiet. Not because they're the loudest, but because everyone knows their words matter. Why does this happen? Why do some of the smartest people seem perfectly comfortable saying almost nothing? Is silence actually connected to intelligence? Or have we misunderstood what intelligence really looks like? Today, we're exploring the psychology of quiet intelligence. And by the end of this video, you might discover that silence isn't empty at all. Sometimes, it's where the deepest thinking happens. Modern society rewards people who are visible. Speak up, share your opinion, post your thoughts, comment on everything. If you're quiet, people often assume you're shy, nervous, or that you simply don't have anything interesting to say. But psychologists have discovered something fascinating. The people who speak the most aren't always the people who know the most. In fact, many highly intelligent people develop the opposite habit. Instead of speaking first, they observe. Instead of reacting, they think. Instead of trying to appear intelligent, they focus on understanding. And that single difference changes everything. Let's start with a simple question. If two strangers walk into a meeting, who do you assume is smarter? The person confidently sharing ideas from the moment they sit down, or the person quietly listening from the corner? Most people choose the confident speaker. It's completely natural. Our brains make quick judgments. Psychologists call these heuristics, mental shortcuts that help us make fast decisions when we don't have all the information. Confidence is one of those shortcuts. If someone speaks with certainty, our brains often mistake that certainty for competence. But confidence and intelligence aren't the same thing. Think about social media. The people making the boldest claims often sound the most convincing. They speak with absolute certainty. They rarely admit they're wrong. And because certainty feels persuasive, people follow them. But real experts often sound different. Listen carefully to a scientist explaining a difficult topic. You'll hear phrases like, "The evidence suggests," "we don't know yet." Based on current research, to someone unfamiliar with the subject, that uncertainty can sound like weakness. But it's actually a sign of intellectual honesty. The more you learn, the more you realize how much you still don't know. And that's where quiet intelligence begins. There's a famous psychological phenomenon called the Dunning-Kruger effect. It describes something surprisingly common. People with very little knowledge often overestimate their abilities. Meanwhile, people with genuine expertise are more likely to underestimate themselves. Why? Because beginners only see the surface. Imagine you've just started learning astronomy. After watching a few videos, you might think, "I've got this figured out." But the deeper you go, you discover black holes, dark matter, quantum physics, relativity. Suddenly, you realize you've barely scratched the surface. Knowledge expands your awareness, not just of what you know, but of what you don't. This is why experts often sound cautious, not because they're unsure, but because they've seen how complex reality really is. In many ways, certainty becomes harder, not easier, the more you learn. There's an old quote often attributed to Aristotle: "The more you know, the more you realize you don't know." Whether or not he said those exact words, the idea captures something important. Intelligence isn't about having every answer. It's about asking better questions. And questions require curiosity, not ego. Think about your last conversation. While the other person was talking, what were you doing? Were you truly listening? Or were you quietly preparing your next sentence? Most people don't listen to understand. They listen to reply. Their brain is already rehearsing what they'll say next. But intelligent people often do something different. They stay curious. Instead of thinking, "How can I sound smart?" they ask, "What am I missing?" That single shift changes everything, because every conversation becomes an opportunity to learn. Imagine two people interviewing the same successful entrepreneur. The first person asks question after question, barely waiting for the answers. The second asks fewer questions. But after each response, they pause. They think. Then they ask a deeper follow-up. Who learns more? Almost always, the second person. Listening isn't passive, it's active investigation. It's collecting clues, patterns, ideas, emotions. Even silence itself communicates something. Sometimes, what someone doesn't say is more revealing than what they do. The smartest people understand this. That's why they're comfortable allowing silence to exist. They know that people often reveal the most after the conversation becomes quiet. Have you ever noticed that the wisest person in the room is often the least interested in proving everyone else wrong? At first, that seems strange if they know the answer. Why don't they say something? Because intelligent people understand something many others don't. Winning an argument doesn't always change someone's mind. In fact, psychologists have found that when people's beliefs are challenged too aggressively, they often become even more convinced they were right in the first place. This is known as the backfire effect. Imagine arguing with someone online. You present facts, evidence, research, but instead of changing their opinion, they double down. The conversation becomes louder, more emotional, and less productive. Nobody learns anything. Smart people recognize this pattern. They know that not every disagreement deserves their energy. Sometimes, walking away isn't admitting defeat, it's choosing peace over pride. There's an old saying, never argue with a fool. From a distance, people can't tell the difference. Whether or not that's always true, the idea is powerful. Your attention is limited. Every pointless argument costs you time, energy, and emotional focus. Intelligent people ask themselves one simple question before speaking. Will this conversation actually lead somewhere? If the answer is no, silence becomes the wiser choice, not because they're afraid, but because they've learned that protecting their peace is often more valuable than protecting their ego. Imagine you're sitting in a busy cafe. Around you, dozens of conversations are happening at once. Most people notice the noise. An observant person notices the patterns. The couple pretending everything is fine, even though they haven't looked at each other once. The manager who keeps checking their watch every few seconds. The nervous student bouncing their leg beneath the table before an interview. These details are easy to miss, not because they're invisible, but because most people are too busy focusing on themselves. Observation requires attention, and attention requires silence. This is why detectives, psychologists, negotiators, and experienced leaders often spend far more time watching than talking. Body language reveals confidence, tone reveals emotion, facial expressions reveal uncertainty, and silence often reveals discomfort. The more you observe, the more accurately you understand people. And understanding people is one of the most valuable forms of intelligence there is. Have you ever noticed how some people can speak for an hour and leave no impression at all, while someone else says just one sentence and everyone remembers it? That's because value isn't measured by the number of words. It's measured by their impact. Think of a respected teacher, a successful CEO, or an experienced mentor. Many of them don't speak constantly. They listen, they observe, then they speak with purpose. Over time, people begin to notice that pattern. They learn that when this person talks, it's usually worth listening. Psychologists call this signal value. When something is rare, people naturally pay more attention to it. If someone talks nonstop, their words begin to blend together. But when someone speaks only after careful thought, their voice carries greater weight. Silence creates anticipation, and anticipation creates attention. That's why the quietest person in the room can sometimes have the strongest influence. Not because they speak the loudest, but because every word feels intentional. Of course, there's another side to this story. Silence isn't always a strength. Sometimes it can become a weakness. Highly intelligent people are occasionally overlooked because they assume their work will speak for itself. They stay silent during meetings, even when they have the best idea. They avoid sharing their opinions, even when those opinions could make a difference. Over time, people may mistake quietness for uncertainty, or assume they have nothing to contribute. Intelligence alone isn't enough. Knowledge has little value if it never leaves your mind. The goal isn't to speak less. The goal is to speak with intention. Know when to listen, know when to observe, but also know when your voice matters. Because sometimes the room doesn't need another opinion, and sometimes it desperately does. Real wisdom is knowing the difference. So, why do smart people often stay quiet? Not because they have nothing to say, but because they've learned that silence has value. They know they don't have all the answers. They listen more than they speak. They think before they react. They choose meaningful conversations over meaningless arguments. And they understand that influence doesn't come from talking the most. It comes from saying the right thing at the right time. But remember, being quiet doesn't automatically make someone intelligent. And being talkative doesn't make someone unintelligent. Some brilliant people are outspoken, others are reserved. Intelligence isn't measured by volume. It's measured by curiosity, humility, self-awareness, and the willingness to keep learning. So the next time you're in a conversation, pay attention to the people who aren't competing to be heard. The quiet person taking everything in might just be the one who understands the most. Because sometimes, the smartest voice in the room is the one that speaks last.